everybody. TGIF, welcome to the Joy Reid Show. There's a lot going on today, particularly in the Trump regime. Dan Bongino, who is the deputy FBI director, was not at work today. He did not go to work today. The Daily Beast reporting that there are a few problems going on between Dan Bongino and the Attorney General Pam Bondi and maybe some other folks inside of the administration. Let me just go ahead and read you this headline. And before I read you the headline from the Daily Beast about Dan Bongino not showing up to work on this Friday, note that if you are going to have a presidential administration and you're going to stack your administration with podcasters and TV personalities and other people who are not like professional in terms of government service, but who have a following, a built-in following that they brought with them based on certain issues, maybe certain conspiracy theories, they're going to be expected by the people who follow them and admire them and who listen to their podcasts and who watch them on Fox. They're going to expect them to follow through on the things that they used to talk about and yak about on those podcasts and on Fox, etc. Right? So just to set that up, Dan Bongino is a longtime podcaster, very popular on the right wing. And there were certain issues that he talked a lot about when he was doing a podcast. One of them was Jeffrey Epstein and the supposed conspiracy to say that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in prison and to bury the Epstein files, which were understood to be the list of clients, high-profile clients, Republicans, Democrats alike, who were using Jeffrey Epstein's illicit services. So that is the setup for you to understand. So now let me read this Daily Beast story about Dan Bongino apparently feuding with Pam Bondi and not going to work today. FBI Director Dan Bongino did not show up to work on Friday and is considering quitting after clashing with Attorney General Pam Bondi over the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. In the latest sign of escalating tensions over the late child sex offender, tempers reportedly flared this week after the administration determined that Epstein did not, after all, have a celebrity client list and was not murdered in his jail cell, as many in MAGA world believe. Now, I will say that I do believe that MAGA is a conspiracy theory-driven religious movement. But that doesn't mean that all of their conspiracy ideas are totally crazy. And, I know it sounds crazy for me to say that not everything that MAGA believes is absolutely insane. But the reality is that Jeffrey Epstein demise is not just being questioned by MAGA. Back in the day when I had a weekend show, I interviewed somebody who was very much, in conversation with Jeffrey Epstein's family and his brother, who never believed that he was murdered, who never believed that he was that he committed suicide, believed that he had been killed. And there's a lot of weird intrigue around Jeffrey Epstein. So I want to go back though and walk through the history of some of Trump's loyal soldiers in his regime, at least up to now, and what they've said about Jeffrey Epstein in the past. So we talked about Dan Bongino. Let's go to Dan Bongino. So Dan Bongino in the past, and this is this Bongino on his old podcast. And this was actually not that long ago. This was on his podcast before he actually got named to the administration. And I will note, he got named to the administration in part because on Twitter, Elon Musk was asking fans, hey, do you want Dan Bongino to be in the administration? And they were like, yeah. It was literally like a fan pick to have him join the administration. Here's what he said back then, before he was in the administration, about Jeffrey Epstein. Here's Dan Bongino.
Huge story. Again, not a lot of people are talking about. There is a little current of information I'm getting that the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi may be finally releasing a lot of information on this Jeffrey Epstein case, which is a huge deal. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I'm hoping it does. I've been covering it for a long time. The Jeffrey Epstein case, you do not know all the details of this thing, I promise. There are a lot of really obviously powerful people. This part you know, but the specific names we may not, including, I believe, the Clintons, based on information I discussed yesterday, who are knee-deep in involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, and no one can figure out what the level of entanglement is. Jeffrey Epstein met with Obama's fixer, his lawyer, Catherine Rumler, who was always the one in the middle of these Obama scandals, and we can't figure out what they're hiding. Here's Marsha Blackburn, who has been all over this. She's a senator from Tennessee, Republican, obviously. And she's like, hey, man, is it time now? It's time to start overturning that rock and seeing what's underneath it. Check this out.
I've repeatedly requested a subpoena for the complete unredacted Epstein flight logs from the FBI. I've also pushed for the release of Ghislaine Maxwell's unredacted little black book of contacts and addresses. The American people have the right to know who flew on his planes, who witnessed the crimes, and who potentially participated in his global sex trafficking ring. Yet time and again, in the last Congress, Democrat leadership and then FBI Director Wray stonewalled my request.
Marsha Blackburn promising there's going to be change on the issue. Now let's listen to what Dan Bongino said literally, I think, this week, yesterday on Fox.
Just telling you what we see in the file. I just want to be crystal clear on this. I am not asking anyone to believe me. I'm telling you what's there and what isn't.
Right.
There is nothing in the file at this point on the Epstein case, and there's going to be a disclosure on this coming shortly. We are working through there is video. That is something the public does
There's video of him killing himself.
No, not the actual act, but the entire MCC Bay, it was only one camera. There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release, that's what's taken a while on this, we are working on cleaning it up to make sure you have an enhanced, and we're going to give the original so you don't think there were any shenanigans. You're going to see there's no one there but him.
Right.
There's just nobody there. So I say to people all the time, if you have a tip, let us know. But there's no DNA, there's no audio, there's no fingerprints, there's no suspects, there's no accomplices, there's no tips, there is nothing. If you have it, I'm happy to see it. There's video clear as day. He's the only person in there and the only person coming out. You can see it.
Vive la différence. This is somebody who for years has been claiming that there was a murder, that there is secrets that are being kept from you, the American people, that and he had, played Marsha Blackburn, Tennessee senator, saying, hey, don't worry about it. With Republicans in charge, you're going to finally get answers on all of they think, just Democrats. We've heard lots of other names, one of them, Donald Trump, that were hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, and no one knows who's in these Epstein files. All right, let's play another piece of video. He mentioned the jail video. I want to play for you. This is a local NBC News report about the Epstein jail video, because Pam Bondi, under a lot of pressure, the Justice Department did release video that purports to show Jeffrey Epstein's last day, his last, hours in the jail cell, but it doesn't exactly show his jail cell. It's a weird angle. And you're going to hear his brother talk about his interpretation of that video. Now let's go to Kash Patel. Kash Patel, also longtime podcaster, right-wing influencer, who has long said also that there is a cover-up in the Jeffrey Epstein case.
I'm not saying it's not there. Who are you going to get that?
For instance, who is currently holding, this is way off the topic, but who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book.
FBI.
But who? There's...
that's under direct control of the director of the FBI. Just like the manifesto from the Nashville school shooting of the Catholic school.
Yeah.
We still haven't seen that, right? It's not the Nashville police or PD saying we don't want this out. The FBI airmailed into that operation and said, this is not getting out. Because they do that because this is another government gangster operation. All these local law enforcement communities get funding from the DOJ and FBI for local programs. And if you don't cooperate, you're not getting your $1 million for this, and you're not getting and that's a lot of money to these local districts. That's how they play the game.
It's the same thing with Epstein's list. It's like, what the hell are these Republicans doing? Oh,
I saw you
give out the list.
I saw you make news this morning about that. I got to get to that.
Yeah.
You say that the FBI has Epstein's list. They're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. You don't think that Bill Gates is lobbying Congress night and day to prevent the disclosure of that list? And why is it that the Senate, and good for Senator Blackburn to try to get it out, but then Dick Durbin comes over the top and says, no, we're not going to release the names. I don't care about the list itself, but if release the names, right? What the hell are the House Republicans doing? They have the majority. You can't get the list? You're going to accept Dick Durbin's word, or whoever that guy is, as to who is on that list and who isn't, and that it can and can't be released, put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are. We have an election coming up, and we need to adjudicate this matter at the polls. God knows the FBI and DOJ aren't going to do anything. But how are you going to reward the FBI with a new headquarters building after their illegal surveillance on Donald Trump continues with a reauthorization of FISA, and we can't even get basic documents out? This is why America hates Congress.
So now you have Kash Patel, who used to say that the FBI director is in possession of the Epstein files. Well, I wonder who the FBI director is now. I'm saying, who is it? Oh, it's Kash Patel. Kash Patel is now the FBI director. So in 2023, he's telling Glenn Beck, the FBI director is who has the Epstein files. That is who is in possession of them. And ultimately, that person, the FBI director, can release them. Well, now, Kash, you're in a position to release them. You are the FBI director. It makes no sense to be the FBI director. You are a podcaster. I wouldn't have made you the FBI director, but Donald Trump did. Donald Trump made you FBI director. And all of a sudden, all of the vehemence about releasing the Epstein files has seemed to vanish when it comes to Donald Trump, who now gets angry if any reporter asks him about the Epstein files. Kash Patel, who's missing in action today, although there's also rumors, and I believe Axios is doing this reporting, that he also is thinking about leaving his job. And then, of course, Dan Bongino, who didn't show up to work today and is apparently feuding with Pam Bondi about these same Epstein files. And according now, as regarding that video, Wired has a story out that's even more weird. Wired has a story out saying that the Department of Justice this week released nearly 11 hours of what it described as a full raw surveillance footage from a camera positioned near Jeffrey Epstein's prison cell. The night the release was intended to address about, but instead of putting those suspicions to rest, it may fuel them further. Metadata embedded in the video and analyzed by Wired and independent video forensics experts shows that rather than being a direct export from the prison's surveillance system, the footage was modified, likely using the professional editing tool Adobe Premiere Pro. The file appears to have been assembled from at least 2 source clips, saved multiple times, exported, and then uploaded by the DOJ's website, where it was presented as raw. So now you can see right there, that's the footage. And that's the footage. I want to actually let you listen to the brother of Jeffrey Epstein. I think he's on that footage. Jason, is that on that same footage?
It is.
All right, let's listen.
Nobody went in or out, but the door is here. And there's a gap around midnight or something like that for like a minute or so. So who knows what that is. But this thing is bull. It shows nothing.
So that's Jeffrey Epstein's brother. His brother talking to a local news station saying that what you're seeing in that video is BS. It isn't legitimate. And there is this 1-minute gap. Pam Bondi. Okay, let's now do Pam Bondi. Let's talk about Pam Bondi. Let's play Pam Bondi in the past. Pam Bondi used to say that not only is the administration going to get to the bottom of Jeffrey Epstein's death, she was going to get to the bottom of it. And she, in fact, said that she has the Epstein files literally in her possession. Let's play that.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll check back with you.
And let's play Pam Bondi this week.
You go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file, along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
All right, let me bring in my guest because it's all very strange. Pam Bondi goes from, being a fireball on getting to the bottom of the Jeffrey Epstein death to being like, there's always a minute gap. That's just the way it is. Kash Patel, very quiet right now after saying, yeah, we're going to get to the bottom of it, and the FBI director can do it. He's not FBI director, not happening. And Dan Bongino not coming to work. Julie K. Brown is our guest. She is a longtime reporter at the Miami Herald. And she has been one of the journalists who has been the most on top of this Jeffrey Epstein saga. And it's great to have her here because she is an expert on this case. Julie K. Brown, it's great to talk to you again. I think the last time that we spoke was on my weekend show on AM Joy. So it is great to catch up with you again. I just want to get from your perspective, just as a journalist, what do you make of this seeming reversal by some of the most prominent purveyors of the theory that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, meaning Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi, you could say, now saying nothing to see here?
Well, obviously they don't know. They didn't know what they were confronting here. They didn't know how much material there is there. They sound like they really don't understand the case from the very beginning. With Pam Bondi announcing on national television that the file or the list was on her desk, I knew right away she didn't know what she was talking about, because first of all, it's very unlikely that there is such a thing as an Epstein list. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't files filled with information about people who were helping Epstein. He couldn't have done all this for so long all by himself. He just couldn't. He relied on a whole staff of people to help him with everything that he did. So there likely is a lot of information in these files, maybe not a so-called list, but there's information about the people who helped him, or witnesses who knew who these other people were that were involved with his crimes.
And so let's go back, because I think for those who are not, who have not followed every gory bit of the details of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific life, one of the reasons that people are so suspicious about his death is that he was in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and at the time, William Barr, was the Attorney General of the United States. And there is a connection between the Barr family, namely Barr's father, and Jeffrey Epstein through his job that he had as a teacher in New York. Can you explain that connection, please?
Well, we believe that Bill Barr, his father, hired Jeffrey Epstein because Jeffrey Epstein didn't have a college degree when he was hired at this very elite, prestigious school in New York. So how would it be that he was hired unless he knew somebody? So the idea that Bill Barr's father was there at the time seems, and we've been told repeatedly that he was the person that would have signed off on hiring someone like Jeffrey Epstein. Now, whether that had anything to do with what happened in the prison, we really don't know. What we do know is that the investigation showed that there was a lot of lapsed security there. The cameras weren't working. The guards weren't paying attention. They lied on their reports. There's a whole litany of problems here. And I think it's always troubled me because I've covered prisons for so long, and I know how these crimes happen in prisons all the time. And, these are criminals, and they know how to evade the cameras, for example. They know how to commit these crimes. So what's always troubled me about this is that they've never released really all the documents that they have on his death, including his autopsy, quite frankly.
And let's talk about the attempted strangulation murder of Jeffrey Epstein, because the other piece of the puzzle is that there was an allegation that a dirty cop, basically somebody who had been convicted of crimes, but who was a police officer, tried to strangle Jeffrey Epstein not that long before he was actually supposedly died by suicide, right?
Well, you want to know something funny about that? That report disappeared. We don't have that report, and neither does the Bureau of Prisons. When they released the report into Jeffrey Epstein's death, they mention in the report that they tried to get the report about that previous episode, and it's just gone. That there's been, as I said, this investigation is filled with things like that, and it does fuel all these conspiracy theories. I tend to think, I try to focus on what we know and what we don't know. And there is still a lot we don't know that I think, really needs to be investigated. I'm not saying I think that he was murdered, but, you put the guy, why would you put Epstein was pretty frail at the time he was arrested. Why would you put him in a cell with a big, beefy former cop who, by the way, was accused of murdering 4 people? Why would you do that? So it really, there's a lot of questions. Like I said, it don't, have any answers or make any sense. Really, the answers don't make any sense.
Well, and indeed, if in fact he was suicidal, why would you have him in a cell alone? Because after that allegation, he was then placed solo in a cell. And if you're claiming that someone was suicidal, I know enough cops and former people who worked in prison environments that you would never put them in a cell by themselves. And then there are just so many coincidences, both guards falling asleep, the fact that there was no actual video into his cell, so no one really could see what happened. There's a lot that's strange. And then there is this question of what he knew. Can you talk? Let's go all the way back. This guy is a math teacher with no college degree, as you said, at the Dalton School, I believe. It's this very prestigious school. He then goes from there to suddenly being the investor of choice, the investment broker of choice for a lot of really prominent people, including the guy who ran Victoria's Secret. Can you tell that story?
Well, Epstein at one point was sleeping on a couch. I mean, he had no money. He was trying to make it in the world of Wall Street. He actually made a bunch of mistakes, got in trouble with the SEC, somehow evaded that, and then ended up opening his own company where he allegedly said he was only going to take people that had, I can't remember how many millions, but you had to have tons of millions of money or you couldn't even be his client. Look, he was a very, very smart man. He really did have a lot of intelligence, and he also knew how to manipulate people. And we don't know exactly how he met Les Wexner. I mean, he was an owner of Victoria's Secret, so who knows? But he somehow met this very wealthy man who ended up giving Jeffrey his house in New York, which is, and I think still remains, the largest residence in the whole city of New York. Why would you give a guy a piece of property like that? And ultimately, Les Wexner claimed that Epstein kind of embezzled the money from him, but he didn't. He never reported it to the police. There's always been these names of some very big time millionaires who did business with him. And Les Wexner was one of those people.
And was he blackmail? Is there evidence that he was blackmailing people and saying, you have to invest with me because I've got videos of you, essentially committing vile crimes with minors who were provided by Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, think about this. I mean, if you're Jeffrey Epstein, and let's just say you do have material like that, do you really have to go to someone and say, if you don't invest with me, I'm going to blackmail you? They know he has that kind of information. It's not like, I'm not saying that that's what he was doing, but he had a lot of information about a lot of powerful people. I mean, we know that. And whether or not they were involved with having sex as part of this underage sex trafficking operation that he was involved with, we really don't know. But what we do know, and as they say, follow the money, is that Jeffrey Epstein got a lot of money from some of these people, and it's really not clear what he was being paid for.
And then he goes on to move to Florida at some point. We know some of his alleged clients for the sex trafficking of girls, of teenage girls, and sometimes preteen girls, allegedly included Prince Andrew, lots of people flying on his plane. Alan Dershowitz saying that he, utilized some of Jeffrey Epstein's masseuse services, but that he was only getting massages. So he said, Harvard University taking big donations from. I mean, he was like, running around with the very rich and famous, right? He was flying the Clintons on his plane, lots of politicians on his plane, Donald Trump partying with him. Can you talk specifically about the Donald Trump relationship as you understand it?
Well, the only thing we really know is that way back when, probably about 20 years ago, they were friends. And the reports are they had two falling outs. One was because of a property in Palm Beach that they were both bidding on, and Trump ultimately won the bidding war, turned around and resold the property to some, I think a Russian oligarch, and made an awful lot of money on that property. And because they were in competition for that property, they had a falling out over that. And then the second thing that happened was Epstein was at an event at Mar-a-Lago, and he allegedly hit on one of the club members' young daughters, and they had a falling out over that. So they weren't the best of friends by any means at the, toward the end of when Epstein was sort of being looked at by authorities. But that said, Epstein modeled his modeling business after Trump's modeling business. So he knew enough about what Trump was doing with his modeling business to start his own modeling business. And what Epstein's modeling business was to have recruiters around the country and around the world. Mainly, they would go to Russia and other countries and get these very, very young girls, make promises to them that they were going to become famous models, bring them to our country on work visas. He had lawyers who helped them get these visas. And then he would set them up in an apartment complex, apartment building that he owned and his brother also owned in New York. And the youngest ones, they would fly to parties with some of these wealthy people, especially in Palm Beach. And that's where some of these girls ended up getting sexually abused.
And let's talk about the Pam Bondi of it, because when Jeffrey Epstein was in Florida, he was going back and forth between Florida and New York, conducting these vile businesses, and also a Caribbean island. I believe he had a whole island, Lolita Island, they called it. So he's going to all these different places. Eventually, he does get caught up legally. And talk about that. And what would Pam Bondi have been doing at that time?
Well, I don't think she was Attorney General in Florida at the time that he first got investigated, but here's what happened. She was Attorney General after the whole thing happened with the former U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta sort of giving him this sweetheart deal that was done all behind the scenes and in secret. He goes to prison, to a jail, and he can't even really call it a jail because he was allowed out all the time. He was just going to an office. He really wasn't in jail. When all that was over, by that time, a lot more information was starting to come out about the scope of his sex trafficking operation. There wasn't, remember, he only got convicted for solicitation of prostitution of, I think, one girl. But by the time all this was done and the deal finally became public that was made, it started unraveling in that there were many, many, many more girls. And this was a huge sort of pyramid scheme where he was using girls to recruit other girls, that he probably was having other men that were involved. It became sort of suspect that this was a bigger case.
Yeah.
And there were stories written about it. And Pam Bondi was Attorney General in Florida when all this was happening. So I've always wondered why the state of Florida didn't look into it. And they, there's no evidence that I know of that they did.
Exit question to you before we let you go. There's also the allegation that he was an agent, either an agent working secretly for the FBI, potentially CIA, potentially Mossad in Israel. Any of that? Any truth to any of that?
I just don't know. I've never seen anything. I know it's been out there with a lot of the conspiracy theorists. I think that it's possible. I mean, we believe that he knew Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, who was involved in some of that intelligence, especially Israeli intelligence community. So I think it's possible, but we really don't know. And that's why, I mean, I think if nothing else, the victims deserve to know why he was allowed to get away with these crimes for so long.
And how and why he died, because I think it is actually relevant to the American people and, to your point, to those victims. If he died as a result of an attempt to silence him or Ghislaine Maxwell to make sure that whoever were their clients, if those clients were powerful people, that information never gets out. Whether or not there's a specific Epstein list, I think there is a fiduciary duty that the FBI and the Department of Justice have to tell the American people what is going on. It is not just MAGA weirdos who are worried about this. There are people, there are victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and there are just regular people who would just like to actually know the information. Julie K. Brown, anything I've left out that you think people need to know about this case, and any insights that you might have as to why Dan Bongino might want to quit over it?
Well, remember, Bongino was one of the people that was saying this is a whole cover up and they're hiding things. And so one has to wonder if the reason why he's so upset is because he's now realizing that he's part of possibly covering it up, because just by the fact that he is where he is in our government, and he was calling for transparency, and apparently the opposite has happened.
He was calling for transparency, and now he's in charge of doing the transparency. They're actually in a position where you say some conspiracy theories, and now you're in a position to deliver. And if you don't deliver, I hate to break it to you, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, you all won the election in part because a certain set of voters believed that you were going to get to the bottom of this. And apparently Donald Trump doesn't want you to, so you're not. It's very weird. Julie K. Brown, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share this channel. Make sure that everybody subscribes to the YouTube channel. 70% of people are lurking, watching these shows and not subscribing. Why would you do that? So make sure that you like, subscribe, and throw some comments in. Thank you all for joining the Joy Reid Show. See you on the next one. And goodbye for now.